Before we begin, I want you to imagine something. Imagine waking in a room you have never seen, in a bed that is not yours, with your wrists raw and the taste of pine on the back of your throat. Imagine the man who took you is the most dangerous thing for 50 miles in any direction. And imagine the exact moment he realizes he has made a terrible mistake. Because he expected a frightened girl. He expected tears and begging and a body too small to matter. What he got instead was me. Stay with me tonight, because by the time this story ends you will understand one simple thing. The strongest cage ever built cannot hold a woman who has already decided she will not break. They took my freedom. They thought that was the same as taking me. It wasn't. Let's begin. The first thing I noticed was the smell of crushed cedar, and the second thing I noticed was that someone had taken off my shoes. That detail bothered me more than the rope. The rope I understood, a thin coil of it looped twice around my left wrist and tied off to the iron frame of the bed, with enough slack that I could sit up but not reach the door. Cruel but logical. People tie up the things they are afraid will run. But my shoes. Someone had knelt down while I was unconscious and worked the laces of my boots loose and set them, side by side, neat as a church pew, at the foot of the bed. There was a strange and awful intimacy in that. It meant whoever had carried me here had spent quiet, unhurried minutes with me at their mercy. It meant they were not panicked. It meant this had been planned. I sat very still and let the room teach me what it could. Log walls, old and dark with smoke. A window with iron sunk into the frame, not bars exactly, but reinforcement, the kind you put in to keep something strong from coming through the glass. Outside, mountains I half recognized. The Ashridge Range, maybe, or the wild country past it. I had hiked the foothills as a girl with my grandmother, nomming every plant we passed like they were relatives. Yarrow for blood, willow for fever, foxglove you do not touch, wren not ever. That was a long time ago. The window told me I was much higher and much farther from anyone who loved me than I had any right to be. My name is Wren Calloway, and I run a small apothecary shop in Hollow's End with a green door and a brass bell, and the last thing I remembered was locking that door at dusk. The bell. I had been reaching up to silence the bell so it wouldn't wake me when I locked up, and then there had been an arm, warm, impossibly strong, smelling of rain and animal, and then nothing. No struggle I could be proud of. No scream. Just the dark closing over me like water over a dropped stone. I am telling you all this calmly now. I was not calm then. My heart was going so hard I could feel it in my teeth. But I have learned a thing about fear over the years, working with poisons and patience and grief. Fear is loud, but it is not smart. If you let it do the talking, it will get you killed. So I made it sit down. I made it be quiet. And I started counting what I had. I had my hands mostly. One wrist tied, one free. I had a brain that knew more about what grows in these mountains than any doctor in 3 counties. I had in the deep pocket of my work apron, and here my free hand crept down slowly, yes. A small glass vial. A folding knife the length of my thumb, dull but real. A twist of dried valerian I used to calm my own nerves. They had taken my shoes but not searched my apron. A man who is sure of his strength does not bother to check whether his prisoner is dangerous. He simply assumes she is not. That assumption was going to cost him. The door opened without a knock. I had told myself I was ready. I was not. He filled the doorway the way weather fills a sky, not just big though he was that, but present, like the room had been waiting for him and only became real when he walked in. Dark hair, longer than town men wore it. A jaw that hadn't been shaved in days. And his eyes, I will tell you the truth, because there's no point lying to you now, his eyes were the wrong color. Amber going on gold, with something behind them that did not belong in a human face. Something that watched the way a wolf watches across a frozen field. Patient, hungry, sad even, though I did not understand the sadness yet. I had heard the stories, of course. Everyone in Hollow's End had. The shifters in the high country, the old families that didn't come down to trade and didn't take kindly to trespass. My grandmother used to leave a saucer of milk and a sprig of rowan on the windowsill every full moon and tell me it was for luck. I had thought it was a charming superstition. Looking at the man in the doorway, I revised that opinion considerably. "You're awake," he said. His voice was low and rough, like he didn't use it much. "Good, you'll heal her faster awake." I want you to notice what he did not say. He did not say, "I'm sorry." He did not say, "Don't be afraid." He did not even say his own name. He walked into a room with a woman he had stolen out of her own life, and the very first words out of his mouth were a command, and a use he had already decided I would serve. So I did the only thing that made any sense. I lied. "Heal who?" I said, and I made my voice small and wobbly the way fear wanted it to sound anyway. "It costs you nothing to let your enemy believe what he already thinks." I don't understand. I'm just a shopkeeper. I sell soap and headache powder. You've made a mistake, please. There are real healers, doctors in the city. I can give you names." "Don't." He crossed the room in 3 strides and crouched down so we were eye to eye, close enough that I could smell the cold mountain on his skin. "I watched you for 2 months, Ren Calloway. I watched you set a logger's broken arm when the doctor was 3 days' ride away and the bone was already turning. I watched you pull a baby through scarlet fever that the city men had given up on. I watched you grow the foxglove and the wolfsbane in the back of your own garden because you're the only one for 100 miles who knows how much will save a life and how much will end one." His jaw tightened. "Don't tell me you sell soap. I don't have the time, and neither does she." So much for the lie. He had watched me. 2 months. While I had been weighing chamomile and gossiping with old Mrs. Antrobus over the counter and thinking my small life was my own, this creature had been on the edge of the trees, learning my hands. The fear tried to stand up again. I made it sit. "Who is she?" I asked, real this time. Something moved across his face, a crack in the granite. "My sister," he said. "Leora, she was shot, Silver." He said the word silver the way a man says the name of the thing that killed his father. 3 days ago up on the ridge, a hunter's bullet. It went through and we got the ball out, but the wound won't close and the poison's in her blood now, and our healer is 80 years old and out of answers. She's burning up. She doesn't know my name anymore." His voice did not break. It did something worse. It went flat, the way a voice goes when a man has decided that breaking is a luxury he cannot afford. "She's 19. And there it was, the thing I had not expected, the thing that complicated everything. I am going to be honest with you about the war that happened inside me in the next few seconds, because if I pretend I was simply brave and good, then this whole story is a lie and I won't tell it that way. Part of me, a hard, cold part I am not proud of, thought, let her die. He took you. He has no right to your hands. Let his sister die and let him learn what it costs to steal a woman out of her own doorway. And the other part of me thought of a girl, 19 years old, burning with silver in her blood, calling out for a brother she no longer recognized. I have spent my whole life learning to keep people alive. You cannot do that work and also choose who deserves it. The moment you start deciding which patients have earned their breath, you stop being a healer and start being something with a list. My grandmother taught me that with her hands on my hands, the year the diphtheria came, and we treated the men who had burned our barn the summer before, because they were dying and we were the ones who could stop it. "Show me," I said. He blinked. Whatever he had braced for, more lies, more begging, a scream, it was not that. "You'll help her," it wasn't quite a question. "I will look at her." I held his gaze, and I let him see that the fear had sat down for good. "And then you and I are going to have a conversation about my hands and what they're worth and what happens to you and every person in this house if you ever lay a finger on me again. Untie me." For a long moment he didn't move. The amber eyes searched my face like he was reading a language he'd thought was dead. Then, slowly, he reached out and worked the knot loose, and his fingers were careful, almost gentle, and I hated how my body wanted to read that gentleness as safety when it was nothing of the kind. The rope fell away. I rubbed my wrist and did not let myself rub it long. Soren, he said. What? My name, you'll want to know it, Soren Vale. He stood and the room got smaller again. This is my house and these are my people, and I won't pretend I'm sorry for taking you because I'm not. I'd do it again. I'd burn this whole valley to keep her breathing. He said it without heat, like a man stating the boiling point of water. But you have my word that no one here will touch you against your will. Break that word and it's not me you'll answer to, it's them. He didn't explain who them was. He didn't have to. As he turned to lead me out, I heard it from somewhere deeper in the house, low and threaded through the walls like a draft you can't find the source of a sound that was not quite a growl and not quite grief. The sound of more than one throat. The sound of a pack waiting to see what the brought-in woman would do. My shoes were still at the foot of the bed, set neat side by side. I put them on. I tied the laces tight, double-knotted, the way you do when you think you might need to run. And I followed the ruthless alpha out into his house full of monsters, with a folding knife in my apron and my grandmother's voice in my ear, going down a hallway I would come to know far too well. Leora's room smelled of fever, and of the wrongness of silver, which is a smell I'd only read about and now will never forget, metallic, but rotten under it, like a coin left in a wound. She was so small in the bed. That was the thing that undid the last of my coldness. I had been braced to meet the sister of a monster, and what I found was a girl with her brother's dark hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, lips cracked, eyes half open and seeing nothing. Her hand kept lifting off the blanket and reaching for something in the air that wasn't there. The wound was high on her shoulder, packed with a poultice that some well-meaning soul had made of the wrong things, and the flesh around it had gone the dark, angry purple-gray that I had only seen twice before in my life, and both of those people had died. An old man sat by the bed, the 80-year-old healer, I guessed. He had kind, defeated eyes and hands that shook, and when he looked up at me there was no resentment in his face that a stranger had come to do his job, only a desperate, naked hope that someone, anyone, might know a thing he didn't. I liked him immediately. His name was Edmund, and he would matter more than I knew. The silver's seated in the blood, I said, mostly to myself, the way I always talk through a problem. I pressed 2 fingers to the girl's throat, counted the gallop of her pulse, lifted her eyelid, smelled the wound and tried not to flinch. You got the bullet out, that was right, that was good. But silver doesn't behave like lead. It poisons the change in her, her body's trying to shift to heal itself and the silver won't let it, so she's caught halfway, burning her own engine to ash. The poultice is making it worse. Whoever packed this used comfrey. Comfrey closes a wound over infection. You've sealed the poison in. I looked up at Edmund. Not your fault. It's the right herb for the wrong injury. He made a small broken sound and pressed his shaking hand to his mouth. Can you fix it? Soren's voice behind me from the doorway, not coming closer. I understood suddenly that he could not make himself come closer, that watching his sister disappear was the one thing in the world this enormous and ruthless man could not face head-on. And so he stood in the doorway and let me stand in the gap between her and the dark. I did not answer him right away. I am not a liar about the things that matter, and the things that matter most are exactly the ones people most want you to lie about. I don't know, I said. I heard him go very still. I won't tell you yes when I mean maybe, I said, turning to look at him. That's not how my hands work. The silver is deep and she's been wrong for 3 days and every hour it's deeper. But I took a breath. I have a method, a thing my grandmother learned from a woman who learned it from someone older than this valley. Charcoal and a tincture and a poultice of the right plants, drawn through the wound and through the blood to pull metal out of a body. I've used it for lead. Once for a girl who swallowed her mother's wedding ring. I looked back down at Leora's small reaching hand. I have never used it for silver, and I have never used it on one of your kind, and I don't know what your kind does to my medicine or what my medicine does to your kind. It might save her. It might kill her faster, and I will need things I don't have. Name them, Soren said. You'll have them. So I named them. activated charcoal, which I could make if they had a fire, and oak, burdock root and milk thistle and red clover for the blood, yarrow and plantain for the wound. And one thing more, the thing that mattered most, the thing that made Edmund's old eyes go wide. Silver leaf, I said. The plant, not the metal, grows high above the tree line and scree in the cold, white underside to the leaf like frost. It's the only thing I know that speaks the same language as the poison. It'll bind to the silver and let me draw them out together. I looked between them. It's rare, it's late in the season, and it grows on the kind of ground that breaks ankles. I know where it grows, Soren said. It's a 4-hour climb, Edmund said quietly, in the dark with the early snow coming. I know where it grows, Soren said again, and he was already turning, already pulling his shirt over his head with no thought at all to the fact that I was standing there, and his back as it changed in the doorway, the shoulders dropping, the spine lengthening, the dark fur coming up through the skin like grass through snow, was the single most terrifying and beautiful thing I had ever seen. A wolf the size of a pony stood where the man had been. It turned its head and looked at me with Soren's amber eyes, and there was a question in them, and the question was, "Will you stay with her while I'm gone?" "Go," I said. "I'll keep her breathing till you're back. Go." He went. I heard his claws on the floorboards, and then the door, and then nothing, and I turned back to a dying girl and an old man with shaking hands, in a house full of creatures who did not trust me, with a knife in my apron I would not get to use, and I rolled up my sleeves. "Boil water," I told Edmund, "all you have, and find me oak dry, hard, and a fire I can choke down to coals. We're going to make charcoal." I pushed the wet hair off Leora's forehead, and her sightless eyes rolled toward the sound of my voice, and her cracked lips moved. "Sore," she breathed. "Soren." "He's coming back," I told her, and I held her reaching hand in both of mine so it had something to find at last. "He's coming back, and you're going to be here when he does. I've got you. You don't know me, but I've got you. My name is Ren, and I am very, very stubborn, and I have decided you're not going to die tonight, and I'll tell you a secret, Leora." I leaned close to her ear, and I don't know why I said it except that it was true. "I always win these. Ask the mountain. I always win." Behind me, Edmund was already breaking up the oak. And far above us, somewhere in the dark in the coming snow, a wolf was running uphill toward a plant that might save his sister, or might be the thing that finally proved the Broughton woman a fraud. Running with his whole desperate heart, not knowing that the woman he'd stolen had just made him a promise she had no idea how to keep. It was perhaps an hour after Soren left that the door opened again, and I learned that not everyone in that house had agreed to his promise. The man who came in was younger than Soren and built like a door, broad through the shoulders, restless in the hands, with pale eyes that moved over the room and landed on me the way a butcher's eyes land on meat. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't have to. Some people announce who they are just by how they take up a doorway, and this one announced trouble in every line of him. So this is the human. He came in without being asked, and Edmund went very still beside the fire, the way a dog goes still when a bigger dog enters the yard. Soren brings a stranger into our house, a town woman with her town poisons, and we're all just meant to stand here and let her put her hands on Leora. He spat the last word. "My cousin, did he tell you that? Leora's my blood too, and he didn't ask any of us. He never asks." "I'm sorry about your cousin," I said, and I kept my hands moving, grinding the charcoal, not looking up, because I have learned that the surest way to provoke a thing that wants you afraid is to show it the fear. "What's your name?" "Garrick." He came closer. I could feel the heat of him, the wrongness of him, the animal packing just under the skin. "And here's what I think, town woman. I think Edmund did all he could. I think Leora's in the hands of whatever comes next, and no clever fingers full of weeds are going to change that. And I think when she dies, not if Soren is going to need someone to blame. And it's going to be a lot easier on this house if that someone is you and not him." He leaned down close to my ear, and his voice dropped to something almost kind, which was the most frightening part. "So you should run, town woman, tonight. While he's up the mountain, I'll even open the door. Run and live. Stay, and when she dies, I'll be the one they send to do what's needed. I set down the charcoal. I stood up slowly until I was looking at him. And I am not a large woman. The top of my head came to his collarbone, and I made myself plant my feet and not give one single inch of the floor. Listen to me, Garrick, because I'm only going to say it once. My voice did not shake. I made very sure of that. I have spent 30 years with my hands inside dying people, and in all that time I have buried more than I've saved, and I have learned to live with both columns of that ledger. So your threat doesn't move me, because the worst thing you could do to me is something I have already made peace with. But here is what will happen if you keep talking. That girl in the bed has maybe one stutter of her heart left in her before I lose her, and every second you spend trying to frighten me is a second my hands aren't on her. So you can stand here and play the wolf and she'll die and it'll be on you. Or you can fetch me clean linen and boiling water and get out of my light. I held his pale eyes. Your choice, but choose fast. The room held its breath. Edmund had stopped breathing entirely. Garrick's lip curled, and for one bright cold instant I was certain I had pushed too far, certain those broad hands were about to close around my throat. And then the girl in the bed made a small, terrible sound, a child's sound, and Garrick flinched. Just barely. A flicker. But I saw it, and I understood it, and it told me everything. Under all that menace, he was a boy watching his cousin die and not knowing how to bear it, and cruelty was simply the only language his grief had ever been taught. Linen's in the chest, he said roughly, and turned and left. He did not fetch the water, but he did not stay. I would take it. I sat back down with my heart slamming and my hands, for the first time all night, allowed myself 3 full seconds to tremble before I made them stop. Then I picked up the charcoal again. Edmund was staring at me. No one, he whispered, talks to Garrick like that. Someone should have years ago, I said. Boil the water, we've wasted enough of it. I worked through the night. The fever climbed. Twice her heart stuttered, and twice I brought it back, breathing into her, pressing the rhythm into her chest with the heels of my hands, swearing at her in a low, steady stream the way my grandmother used to swear at the dying. Not yet, you don't get to go yet. Edmund cried and worked and didn't stop. The charcoal went black and fine. The water boiled. And the wound, when I unpacked it and cleaned out the comfrey and saw how deep the rot had gone, told me the truth that I did not say out loud, that I did not even let myself think in words. That even with the silver leaf, even with everything I knew, this girl was so far gone that I would need more than medicine. I would need a miracle, or I would need to make a choice no healer should ever have to make. But that is the second half of the story. For now, let me leave you here in the firelit dark, with a stubborn woman's hands inside a dying girl's wound, and a wolf running uphill through the first falling snow. And let me tell you only this, before we go on. When Soren Vale came back down the mountain just before dawn, bleeding from the scree, the silver leaf clenched in his jaws like the last hope in the world. He came through the door just before dawn, on 2 legs again, naked to the waist and bleeding from a dozen places where the scree had opened him up, and in his fist, not his jaws, he must have changed back somewhere on the trail to carry it more carefully, was a fistful of pale green leaves with frost-white undersides. Silver leaf. He stopped just inside the room, and I watched him take it in. The fire choked down to red coals exactly the way I'd asked, the water boiling in 3 pots, clean linen torn into strips and laid out in rows, Edmund moving with purpose instead of despair, Garrick standing in the far corner with his arms folded and his face unreadable here and not gone, which meant something had shifted while Soren was away, and his sister still breathing, still alive. Her chest rising and falling under my hand where I knelt beside her. I had braced for him to expect a corpse. I think a part of him had climbed that mountain certain he'd come back to one, and had gone anyway because the climbing was the only thing that kept him from breaking. What he found instead was a Broughton human woman running his house like she'd been born to it, with his sister's life still flickering inside the circle of her hands. He didn't say anything. He crossed the room and put the silver leaf in my palm like a man laying down something holy, and his hand was shaking, and he looked at me, and I saw the question in him that pride wouldn't let him ask. Is it enough? It might be, I said. Sit down before you fall down. Edmund, clean him up, he's no good to her bleeding out on the floor. I'm fine. You're swaying, I said not unkindly, and went to work on the leaves. Now, here is where I have to tell you about the choice, because everything in this story was leading to it, and I have turned it over in my mind every night since, and I still do not know if I was right. A healer's worst nights aren't the ones where someone dies. They're the ones where you had to choose, and you'll never know what the other road held. I ground the silver leaf with the charcoal and the burdock and the milk thistle, and I made the draw exactly as my grandmother taught me, and I packed it into Leora's wound and brewed the rest into a tincture and got it into her, drop by drop, between her cracked lips. And for 2 hours it worked. I watched the dark gray rot at the edge of the wound pull back. I watched a thread of clean blood come up where there had only been poison. I let myself briefly hope. And then I watched it stop. The silver leaf bound the surface silver, the silver in the wound, but the poison that had gone deep, the silver seated in her blood and her bones, and the wolf engine at the center of her that was trying to heal her and failing, that silver would not come. The draw could only pull what it could reach, and it could not reach deep enough. Her fever spiked again. Her pulse went thin and fast and wrong. I sat back on my heels, and I made myself say the truth out loud, because Soren had earned the truth even though he had not earned anything else. The draw isn't enough, I said. The silver's too deep. It's in the part of her that's you, the part that changes. And as long as that part is poisoned, she can't shift, and as long as she can't shift, her body can't finish healing itself. She's caught. The draw can clean the wound, but it can't clean the wolf. Then what? Soren said. His voice was very quiet. What do we do? And this is the choice. Listen. There's one way I can think of, I said slowly, and it's the kind of thing that gets healers hanged. The silver is jamming her change. If I could force the change, force her body to shift, even though it's poison, the shift itself would burn through the silver, melt it out of her like fever burns out an infection. The change is the strongest medicine her body owns, but I held his eyes because he needed to hear all of it. To force a shift, I'd have to push her body to the edge of dying. I'd have to use a drug, foxglove, a precise, terrible amount to drive her heart so hard and so fast that her body panics and reaches for the wolf to save itself. It might work. The change might burn out the silver and she'd wake up whole. I took a breath. Or her heart, already weak, already poisoned, might simply stop, and there'd be no bringing it back because I'd be the one who stopped it. The room had gone utterly silent. You'd be choosing to maybe kill her, Garrick said from the corner. Not a sneer this time, just the flat horror of it. On purpose, with your own hand. Yes. I said I would not soften it. If I do nothing, she dies slow tonight or tomorrow for certain. If I do this, she lives or she dies fast by my hand in the next hour. I cannot tell you which. I have never done this. I have only read that it can be done in a book my grandmother kept that she made me swear never to use. I looked at Soren. It is not my choice to make. She's your sister, it's yours. And whatever you choose, I will do and I will carry it. I want you to understand what I was really handing him. I could have just done it. I had the foxglove in my apron. I could have made the choice myself and spared him the weight of it, the way doctors do, the way the powerful always do to the people they think can't bear knowing. It would have been kinder, in the small, dishonest way that taking someone's choice away always pretends to be kind. But he had taken my choice from me. He had stolen me out of my own life because he had decided he knew best, because his love for his sister was so big it had eaten his respect for everyone else's right to say no. And I was not going to do the same thing back to him, even gently, even for mercy. If we were going to share this, and we were sharing it whether we liked it or not, then he was going to make his choice with open eyes, the way I'd have wanted mine. So I held it out to him, the whole terrible weight of it, and I watched the ruthless alpha of the Ashridge Mountains, The man who'd told me he'd burn a valley to keep his sister breathing. Discover that there are some fires you cannot set for someone. That love, real love, sometimes means handing the knife to another person and praying. "Do it," he said. His voice cracked clean in half on the second word. "Save her, please, please." It was the first time he had said that word to me, please. I have thought about that too. "Then everyone who isn't going to help holds still and stays quiet," I said, and rolled up my sleeves and reached for the foxglove. "And Soren, when her heart stops, because it might, you do not touch me, you do not stop me, you do not change. I will bring her back or I won't, and if you interfere I will lose her for certain. Can you give me that? Your hands off, no matter what you see." He looked at me like I'd asked him to hold his own breath until I told him to stop. Then he knelt at the head of the bed, took his sister's slack hand in both of his, and made himself into stone. "My hands are off," he said. "Save her." I measured the foxglove. "I will not walk you through every second of the hour that followed, because some of it I don't have words for and some of it I won't give away to anyone. But I'll give you the shape of it." I gave her the drug and her heart began to run. Faster, faster. Past anything safe, past anything I'd ever pushed a heart to, and Edmund was praying under his breath, and Garrick had come to the foot of the bed without my noticing, and Soren was stone, beautiful, terrible stone, his eyes never leaving her face. Her body arched. The fever sweat poured off her. And I leaned close to her ear, and I did the only thing I had left, the thing that isn't in any book, the thing my grandmother actually taught me on her own deathbed, when I asked her what the secret really was after all the herbs were spent. "You talk to them," she'd said. "At the very end, when the medicine's done all it can, you talk to them and you give them a reason. The body wants to quit. You give it a reason to be stubborn instead. That's the real medicine, Wren. The rest is just leaves." So I talked to her. "Leora, Leora, your brother climbed a mountain in the snow for you, and he's right here, and he's so scared. He's never been this scared in his life, and he needs you. You hear me? You don't get to leave him with that. You don't get to make him carry it. So you reach for it now. You reach for the wolf. It's yours. It's been yours since you were born. The silver's just sitting on top of it like ice on a river, and underneath the river's still running. You reach down through the ice and you grab it. Now, Leora, now." Her heart stopped. The room made a sound I'll hear until I die. And I did not stop. I put the heels of my hands on her sternum and I drove the rhythm back into her. 1 and 2 and 3, breathing for her, swearing at her, "Not yet, not yet. You don't get to go yet, reach." And under my hands I felt it happen. I felt her change. The bones moved under my palms. The fever broke like a fist opening. A sound came out of her that was not a girl's sound and not a wolf's sound, but something in between. The sound of a body remembering what it was. And the wound on her shoulder, I saw this. I will swear to it on anything you like. The wound steamed. A thin gray-silver vapor rising off it as the heat of the change boiled the poison out through her skin. And then her heart under my hands kicked. Once, then again steadier. Then it found its rhythm and held it. And the thing in the bed was a girl again, drenched and shaking and breathing. Deep, clean breaths. The rot gone from her shoulder. The gray gone from her skin, and her eyes opened, clear, dark, her brother's eyes. And the first word she said, in a cracked whisper, looking up at the man who turned to stone for her, was his name. "Soren." I sat back on the floor. My hands were shaking too hard to be of any more use to anyone. Across the bed, the ruthless alpha of the Ashridge Mountains put his face down against his sister's hand and wept like a child, his whole enormous frame shaking with it, and Garrick made a sound and turned away to hide his face, and old Edmund was openly sobbing into his sleeve, and I sat on the floor in a stranger's house full of monsters and let the tears come down my own face because I had won. I had won. I always win, I'd told her, and this time, God help me, it had been true. We almost lost her. I want to be honest about that forever. I had her heart in my hands, and for 4 endless seconds there was nothing in it. And if she had not reached down through the ice when she did, I would have spent the rest of my life knowing I was the one who stopped it. The line between healer and killer is so much thinner than people want to believe. I walked it that night with my eyes open. I would not wish that walk on anyone. But she lived. It took Leora 3 days to come back to herself, and in those 3 days the house changed around me, and so did I. I want to be careful here, because this is the part of stories like mine that usually goes wrong. This is the part where the stolen woman is supposed to look at the man who stole her and decide that his love for his sister excuses what he did to her, that the depth of his pain is a kind of payment, that because he wept he's forgiven. I have heard that story my whole life. I have never once believed it. So no, I did not melt. I did not decide Soren Vale was a good man who done a bad thing for good reasons and we could all move on. What he did to me was wrong, and his sister's life did not make it right, and I told him so on the second day, standing in the kitchen with a cup of his tea going cold in my hands. You took me, I said. You watched me for 2 months like an animal stalking a deer, and you put your arm around my throat in my own doorway and you stole me, and I saved her. Both of those things are true, and the second one doesn't cancel the first. I need you to say you understand that. Not that you'd do it again, I heard you, I know you would. But that it was wrong, that I had a right to say no and you took it. I need to hear you say it, or there's nothing else for us to say to each other. He was quiet a long time. He's a man who weighs his words because his words have always had the weight of an alpha behind them, the kind that move 100 people. I watched him work to set that weight down and just be a man in a kitchen who'd done something unforgivable. It was wrong, he said finally. You had the right to say no. I took it because I was drowning and you were the shore, and I didn't care in that moment what it cost you, and that his jaw worked. That's the part I'm ashamed of. Not that I saved her, that I stopped seeing you as a person while I did it. You were a tool to me, a means. And then I watched you hand me my own sister's life like it was mine to keep, and tell me the truth when a lie would have been easier. And I had to look at what I'd done to a person who was— He stopped. I'm sorry, Ren. I have no right to your forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it. I'm just telling you that I know. It was not enough. I want to be clear about that. Sorry is never enough to pay for a thing like that, and I did not pretend otherwise, and I did not give him a soft look and tell him it was all right, because it wasn't. But it was true, and true is where everything has to start. Take me home, I said, today, not because I've forgiven you. Because I have a shop with a green door and an old woman named Mrs. Antrobus who'll have called the whole county out searching, and a life that's mine, and you're going to give it back to me. All of it. And then you're going to leave me alone unless I send for you. Those are my terms. My hands are worth that, Soren Vale. My freedom is worth that. Do we understand each other? I had braced for him to argue. Ruthless men do not like terms. They like to set them. But he had changed in those 3 days, or maybe the change had started the moment he handed me the knife of his sister's life, and learned what it was to have no power over an outcome that mattered. He looked at me, and something in his face that had been clenched my whole time in that house finally let go. We understand each other, he said. I'll take you home, and I won't come unless you send for me. A pause. You have my word, and you've seen by now what my word is worth in this house. I had, for all his crimes, the man had never once broken it. Garrick took me as far as the tree line, Soren's idea, and a clever one, because it forced the two of us to walk an hour together in cold silence, and somewhere in that hour the boy under the menace finally spoke. I'd have killed you, he said, looking straight ahead. The first night, if she died. I want you to know that, so you know what you walked into when you stood up to me and called my bluff. A long pause. And I want you to know I'm glad I'd have been wrong. It was the closest thing to an apology I think he had in him, and I took it, because grief makes monsters of gentle people sometimes, and the measure of a person is whether they climb back out. Leora I saw last. She was on her feet by then, pale and thin but herself, and she came out to where Soren waited with the horse, and she put her arms around me and held on like I was the mast of a ship. I heard you, she whispered. When my heart stopped, I heard you telling me to reach down through the ice. I was so far away and I heard you and I came back. You're the reason I came back." She pulled away and looked at me with her brother's eyes. "I don't know how to pay that." "You don't," I said. "That's not how it works. You just live a good long life and you don't waste it, and somewhere down the road you reach down and pull somebody else back through the ice, and that's how it's paid. Now let go of me before you make me cry in front of your terrifying family." She laughed. It was the best sound I'd heard all week. Soren brought me home at dusk, 3 days after he'd taken me at dusk. A neat and terrible symmetry I don't think either of us missed. He stopped the horse at the edge of town where no one would see, and I climbed down on my own, and we stood there a moment in the cold blue light with the lamps of Hollow's End coming on one by one below us. "If you ever do to another woman what you did to me," I said, "silver won't be what kills you. I will. I know what grows in these mountains. Remember that." "I'll remember," he said, and I believed him. I walked down into my own town on my own 2 feet, and I let myself into my own shop with my own key, and the brass bell over the green door rang the way it always rings, and for one wild second my whole body braced for an arm around my throat. And then there was nothing, just my dark, quiet shop and the smell of dried lavender and my grandmother's herbs in their rows, and my life, exactly where I'd left it, waiting. I sat down on the floor right there in the dark and I shook for a long time. Then I got up and lit the lamp and put the kettle on, because that is what you do. You light the lamp, you put the kettle on, you go on. That was a year ago. I'm mostly all right now. I sleep with a chair against the door, which I didn't used to, and I startle at the bell sometimes, and I expect I will for a long while yet, and that's the cost of it, and I carry it the way I carry everything else. I won't pretend it didn't change me. It did. But here is the thing they never tell you about being taken. They take your body and your time and your sense of safety. All of that, yes. But the thing they're really after, the thing they think they've gotten, is yourself. The part of you that decides. And that part, it turns out, is the one thing in the whole wide world that no one can take by force. They have to be given it. And I never once gave it. Not for a single second of a single hour in that house full of wolves. I fought back with the only weapons that have ever truly been mine, my knowledge, my stubbornness, my refusal to beg, and I walked out with them still in my hands. He never expected that. He expected a frightened girl. I think about Leora most of all. I hope she's reaching down through the ice for someone somewhere the way I taught her. I think she is. She had that in her. I have not sent for Soren. I want to tell you I never will, and most days that's the truth. He did a terrible thing, and being sorry doesn't unmake it. And a woman who'd run back to her own kidnapper because he wept once and kept his word after would be a fool. And I am a great many things, but I have never in my life been that. But I'll tell you what came in the mail last week, with no note, no name, nothing but a Hollow's End postmark from someone who must have ridden a long way down to send it from town so I wouldn't know where it came from. A small pressed plant between 2 sheets of wax paper, pale green, white on the underside like frost. Silver leaf. And folded around it, in a hand I'd never seen but somehow knew, 3 words. Not I'm sorry, not come back. Just still keeping it. His word, he meant. He was still keeping his word, still leaving me alone, still waiting for a sending that I have not, will not, probably will not send. I pressed the silver leaf into my grandmother's book, on the page where the dangerous medicine is, the page she made me swear never to use, and I closed it, and I put it back on the shelf.